Season 4, Episode 37 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. Jonathan Lidskin is with me, as apparently not always. Sometimes one forgets to set an alarm when we're doing a show. And then
call me out for it. That's okay.
And then the next day brings my favorite chicken and just doesn't tell me about it.
Is there no Canes in Syracuse?
No, the nearest Canes is literally Times Square or State College. And Jordan Majewski is here with us as well. Took a little while to get to him down there, but thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so the biggest story in college basketball today is the dominant performance by the number one team in the country that has been playing like it since they got Donovan Clingan back. UConn 99, Xavier 56. I know that they're not number one in the metrics right now, but it's kind of getting hard to argue that the UConn team with a healthy Clingan isn't the best. Do you guys agree?
Yeah,
I would. Yeah,
their metrics are misleading because Clingan missed a month. Like, they have a top 10 defense, and metrics won't tell you that.
Yeah, I just look at what they're able to do on that end of the floor. I mean, just it's stifling, really. They go out there today, it's 10 points in the first 18 minutes, and the game's over by the under 4 timeout of the first half. I mean, they are so dominant. They can win in so many different ways. I just look at this UConn team, and I don't really see flaws. I mean, they're playing a lot slower than they did last year, but they can still do basically everything they did last year, just maybe a little slower, and they're not quite as deep. But it's still they're so well coached. They run so much great stuff. I think Dan Hurley over the last couple of years has gone from a very good coach that's going to be competitive to arguably the best coach in college basketball over the last 2 years. And Jonathan, you texted me today that you said that he's the best in the country. I mean, I argue that right now.
Yeah, it's just getting really hard to sit down and watch UConn play and not just notice the amount of different movements and actions that they run. And that's all Dan Hurley and his staff.
Jordan?
Yeah, he's followed a kind of Jay Wright career arc where the narrative was he can't win until he started winning and rarely losing, in fact, So, and it's the same thing where you notice how like technical and X's and O's Villanova was on the court, and the same is true with UConn. Like you mentioned, just the half court stuff they run is basically unparalleled in the game. They made Xavier, who's not, a great team, but certainly a capable team and a well-coached team, look like a bye game today. And, it was just never competitive from the first 30 seconds. And yeah, I totally agree. Best coach in basketball right now.
8 Big East wins in a row. Like, that just doesn't happen in this era of the Big East where everyone's so competitive. Yeah, only 3 of those games have been on the road, but they also, and it's not the most difficult stretch of the schedule, but that's still 8 straight Big East wins. It's the 6th longest winning streak in the country. And he's doing it in the most difficult league to do this consistently, and maybe this in the Big 12.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see a team that can match up with them when they're fully healthy, like they didn't have Castle at Kansas. And, the 2 losses, Kansas and Seton Hall, they both kind of were physical with their switching off the ball and kind of pushed, UConn off their spots. But each of those games had kind of a weird, I mentioned Castle, and they basically played Kansas to a draw more or less at Kansas, without Castle. And then Seton Hall, they, had just come back from Gonzaga, and, Seton Hall was obviously jacked up for that game. But, those 2 teams do have similar, like, profiles in that they are physical and switch everything. And so that's, kind of, if you want to point out one weakness UConn would have, it's that, playing a team that has size and can switch.
Yeah, but then again, you just look at how hard it is to build a team that is as physical, as athletic, as long and able to switch with the way Kansas did. I mean, KJ Adams might be the best defender in the country at switching that specific action. While, I mean, Seton Hall's got so many big wings and big guards that, I mean, that's kind of their identity as well. There's not a ton of teams that can make that their identity because they don't have those types of bodies. And even then, like, UConn can beat teams with great athletes as well. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, St. John's is a really athletic team. Carolina has a lot of great athletes, and Indiana's got some great athletes. Texas as well. I mean, UConn can beat really athletic teams. They can beat really unathletic teams. They can beat anyone, and they can basically beat anyone at their own game as well, because they're just so malleable to doing different things.
Yeah.
There's only so many teams that have a player like KJ Adams that can switch and guard 4 or 5 positions. Kansas not only has him, like McCullough can probably guard 4 positions too. Like maybe not a center, but he can guard the 4 others.
And then you get maybe one of the best defensive point guards in the country as well.
Right.
And I mean, Dickinson was a great matchup for Klingon. So, I mean, and they also have Bill's freaking self. So,
right.
And I mean, with Xavier on the other hand, in this game, 4-5 in the Big East in year 2 for Sean Miller. Definitely a step back. We expected this. This is team 344 in minutes continuity. They lost basically everyone from last year, and they're still pretty good in the metrics. I mean, they're 42nd in KenPom, which is higher than I maybe would have expected them. I think I had them around 50 preseason, and that was kind of just because that was when the news broke that Fremantle and Hunter wouldn't be playing. So I probably would have moved them down further. But they've taken some tough losses. They've had some good performances. I still think that at the end of the day, they will screw something up for somebody in the Big East.
Oh, absolutely.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think they're properly kind of rated in the metrics right now. Like, sitting around 42nd. I was like you. I had them around 50th in the preseason. Like, they still scrap. They still have some talented players, but it's just their front court depth is so thin. And like, UConn was just running circles around them today. It was really interesting to see. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. They'll make somebody's life miserable one night in the Big East, but not a tournament team.
One of those teams are going to give a bubble team like Seton Hall, Providence, or Butler or somebody late in the year, a loss that they had to win, basically.
Yeah. Moving on from that game, another big one in the American Conference today between FAU and North Texas. And North Texas has been really, really good over the last month. FAU has played in a lot of close games, but they've won a lot of close games as well. I believe after today, 16-4 in games decided by 5 points or less or went to overtime over the last 2 seasons. And that, from today, John L. Davis put on the Superman cape once again and proved why he's an All-American.
Yeah, I think for so long this season, much of the dialogue around FAU was like, oh, they're so confusing. Oh, we can't figure them out. Like, at this point, FAU they are what they are. And that's a team that plays to the level of competition, no matter really who it is. Like, they play good against good teams. They play bad against bad teams. And you mentioned the close game stuff. I know winning close games is like hard to be repeatable, but to FAU's point, they have multiple guys that are really good isolation scorers, and then they have Dusty May. So good isolation scorers, good coach. It's a recipe to win close games. That's going to work for you a lot of the time, and they've shown that late.
Jordan?
Yeah, FAU is just destined to be a lightning rod this year after, just wildly overperforming expectations last year. There was no chance that they were going to not have, games and losses where everybody was like, what the hell's with this team? I knew that they were overrated or whatever. But it was really interesting, the game today against North Texas, a 60-possession game, which you expected with North Texas and 2 teams who know each other so well from the CUSA games. But Florida Atlantic had the most transition possessions North Texas has allowed in, I think, 3.5 years. So they were really hunting that early offense, which worked out for them before North Texas could get that no middle defense set up. And, it's funny to say in a 60 possession game that their transitions won it, but that's basically what happened. They got enough early buckets to make the difference.
Yeah. Last year, FAU's hallmark was they can beat you at your game, no matter what your game is. They played 84 possessions against Bryant, 75 against FIU. Like last year, they played ridiculous amounts of possessions against some teams, and then they would play 55 possession games against North Texas, and they swept them.
Right.
They are kind of similar this year. I mean, they killed Liberty in a slow game. They beat North Texas in a slow game, and then they can beat Tulane in a fast game. They can boat race Virginia Tech. They can beat Butler in fast games. They can still kind of do that. And the problem, though, for FAU has just been they've become so reliant on Davis because Martin's not quite been himself all year. Boyd's been in and out of the lineup, and like Golden's been great, but maybe not quite as reliable as you want him to be. And Davis has just masked all of that enough to the point where this is still a comfortable, firm tournament team at the moment, sitting 17-4. And with John L. Davis 28 today, he had 34 against UTSA, 30 against UAB. I mean, he's putting on the cape every week. And we discussed this with Rocco like last week. This is not the season FAU wanted to have, but they've had to get this from John L. Davis, and they've gotten it from John L. Davis.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that they're actually a better, by the metrics, almost across the board, offensive team than they were last year against a significantly harder schedule, too. So, people kind of overlook that when they're like, what's wrong with FAU? And sure, there are some bizarre losses, Bryant, FGCU, Charlotte, who's actually way overperforming their expectations as well. But, there's really nothing wrong with FAU. But like you said, some minor, Martin's not the same player. But, yeah, they're still an elite offensive team against an extremely difficult schedule. So, I don't know what – it's all nitpicking after that,
And they do need Giancarlo Rosado back. Like that makes them – that gives them just another element because they end up relying more on Golden, and he's not been as reliable as maybe some of the top bigs in the country. He's been very good, but you can't go ask him to play as big of a role and as often as they need him to play when Rosado's out. So Rosado's an important.
Any foul trouble whatsoever from Golden is, death for them in terms of front court depth.
Yeah, and the thing about North Texas, though, is, and I've said this on Twitter multiple times this year, that this year for North Texas feels more like a continuation of the Grant McCasland era than the Grant McCasland era at Texas Tech does. And we kind of discussed this a little bit last night, how Texas Tech's become this offensive team under McCasland, and North Texas is still doing the North Texas stuff. I mean, Ross Hodge, great JUCO recruiter, brought in a bunch of fun guys this year. And I mean, they got that big win against SMU this week that we discussed on Thursday, and they play FAU really tough. They're not going to make the NCAA tournament, but this is a fun program to monitor.
I mean, North Texas probably wins this game today if Reuben Jones plays. They're 6'5" best on-ball defender, and, John L. Davis was basically the only offense for FAU. You think he at least takes several buckets away from Davis with his presence alone. So, it stinks for them that Jones got re-injured.
Yeah, and the other fairly interesting result from that league today is now Memphis sits 15-5, 3 losses in a row after UAB wins 97-88. Memphis allows 97 points to a UAB team that, I mean, is 8th in the American in offensive efficiency. A UAB team that has been up and down all year and really kind of tough to figure out. And then Memphis has been just playing bad basketball now for about a month since they beat Virginia. They've just been playing bad basketball. now they don't have Mills. They bring Jordan Brown back to the program, and I don't understand really what they're trying to get out of Jordan Brown, because I don't think he wants to be there. I don't think the team wants him there. I think he's just there to collect the check, basically.
Yeah, I think Memphis, like we talked about this, Memphis has kind of been playing with fire for a while, and then once, like over the last couple of weeks, they've really started to lose games. Like the close games that they were winning started turning into close losses, and then UAB just comes out and really controls most of the second half today. I mean, this is a UAB team that's solid, but this right now is just more about Memphis not playing together and overall not being a very good basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, even this is a team that was built on their resume was built on their non-conference wins, and every single one of those is basically devalued with each passing week. So, even that ground is starting to crumble. So, and the quotes from Penny in post game are always doomsday with him, but he's always maintained that this is a team that, has no connection. They, play, he's made multiple comments about how he only has one basketball and all this. And, usually that's par for the course for Penny, but that's really coming home to roost with them lately. So yeah, it's not a pretty scene right now for them, but it's hard to count them out given the talent level they have. And, that just the fact that they have so many legitimate scorers. But yeah, it's just a lot of disparate parts right now that are finally not coming together in the close games.
This has to be a wake-up call for Memphis. And the other thing with Penny that I've said for years, and Jonathan, you've also said this for years, they will always come out for the big games. They always have. Penny they would always smack Houston around and get into rock fights with Houston and play the tournament games really close. And no matter what, they would show up when it mattered. But it was always the inconsistency where I think the coaching staff, the players would overlook games on their schedules. They wouldn't have good game plans coming out. This next game against Rice on Wednesday, Rice is really bad. They are 1-6 in the American. But this next game against Rice has to be treated like it's their national championship. They need to come out and make a statement, because
Rice is the least athletic team in the league. So if they, don't just absolutely pace them with their athleticism, then it's definitely doomsday time.
Yeah, because we're looking at, even if they beat Rice, but it's uninspiring, they're going to drop the metrics because they are a 16-point KenPom favorite there. They're already 60th in KenPom. They're near that in the net. This wasn't close to a quadrant 1 win for UAB. And just imagine saying that like a month ago when Memphis was 9-2 and climbing and looked like they were a top 15 team in the country after Christmas.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you tweeted this earlier today, but their resume is also just completely unrecognizable from what we thought it was going to be when they were winning all these games. All the teams that they scheduled, from the Atlantis tournament to just all the home away non-con games they scheduled, those teams aren't good. They're not like, they didn't schedule tournament teams, and it's not really Memphis's fault that those teams are playing that way, but it's kind of just, it is what it is at this point.
They have 2 quadrant 1 wins right now. Texas A&M on the road, and that's going to stay quadrant 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A&M is 45th, so that would have to get really bad. But the other one is Clemson at home. Clemson's 28th. So if Clemson comes out and doesn't play to expectation against Louisville on Tuesday, that game could drop to quad 2. Then Clemson also has to play Virginia this week. Then they play North Carolina. There's a good chance that game doesn't end up quad 1, because look, Clemson themselves only has 2 quad 1 opportunities remaining. I mean, there's a legit shot Memphis ends the season with 1 quadrant 1 win from their non-conference slate.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is a team that visited three teams that made the NCAA tournament last year in the non-conference schedule. Visited a fourth team that hired a coach that made the NCAA tournament basically every year, and played neutral games against NCAA tournament projected teams, three of them, and then hosted two of the teams that were projected to be best in the ACC. I mean, it was a great schedule. It's just been really just ridiculous how poorly it's aged.
Yeah.
Moving
Those teams was Arkansas because they're similar in a lot of ways. A lot of ISO guys who aren't really gelling together. And, Arkansas is having kind of the same season Memphis is, but to a much more extreme.
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas, we didn't really get into this last night, but they lose Devo Davis, just leaves the program. And I mean, he wasn't playing as well as he had been in the past, but just to abruptly leave the program after 121 games as a Hog. The guy was a Hog legend, and this is how he leaves. He's still got another year of eligibility, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of high major coaches that are going to hit up his phone and say, hey, we need a defensive stopper that can be a secondary or tertiary scoring option. And that's what he can be somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the whole Arkansas situation, the other notable result from today came in the MAC. Actually, we tend not to talk much about the MAC on this podcast because I do so much talking about the MAC everywhere else. But Quinnipiac goes to Fairfield, improves to 16-4 in Tom Pecora's first year, 7 wins in a row for the Bobcats. They just have they out-physicaled Fairfield today, and they made the shots when it mattered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't get to watch much of that one. I was traveling today, but I was keeping up with your tweets as usual, Sam. And sounded like a wild game. Tice went down late. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Tice went down with like 25 seconds left.
Ooh.
It might have been the right shin. That's what Ethan Hurwitz, Quinnipiac Chronicle, said. We'll get updates on that probably by their next game. I'll reach out and try to figure stuff out.
But yeah, what a difference Lewis is, and Pecora is just maximizing him so much that them and Fairfield were the two surprise teams for me in the MAC. I just didn't know how to evaluate Fairfield really after their surprising offseason. But yeah, they're also their talent level and just what they can get out of the wings is so impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I come into the season thinking these are mediocre MAC teams. I come in thinking, and I'm coming thinking what's going to change this year. And what changes is that Jalen Leach finally becomes the star that Fairfield had been hoping he'd become for the last 4 years. And Bryson Goodine steps up, and Caleb Fields is so much more consistent, and they don't need as much out of him. And Fairfield, everything seems to be clicking. And then for Quinnipiac on that side, you get Savion Lewis becomes one of the best playmakers in the country. I mean, last year he was not a great offensive player at all. This year he's one of the best point guards in the country right now, and that's just been such a strong development for them. They have so much physicality in the interior with Tice just being able to grab rebounds and Otieno doing what he does. I've just been really impressed with what Pecora has been able to get out of this Quinnipiac group. Jonathan, do you have anything? Have you watched a single second of them this year?
No, I didn't watch this game today. Haven't really watched a ton of MAC this year. I know the league is like super confusing, and I guess teams are starting to separate themselves at the top. But sounded like a really good game today. Super good defense. But yeah, I mean that's your neck of the woods, so I'll let you handle that.
Jonathan, you know what it's time for?
I think it's time for a Valley update, Sam.
It's time for the Valley update. Let's go.
Okay, so I focused really on 2 games yesterday, and I talked about it a little, that the top 4 teams in the league were playing yesterday. Indiana State Bradley was a really good one. Indiana State pulled away in overtime. I was really impressed with Bradley in this one. I know they lost. It was on the road, but they were with them the entire way. I don't think Indiana State's lead ever got more than like 6 or 7. Bradley's a team that typically doesn't like to play super fast. They're really good defensively, but they were able to stay in a game the entire time that Indiana State had 1.3 points per possession. It was a really good night for the entire Bradley starting 5. This team's just super balanced, and they're going to continue to be a tough out. And I think we can probably comfortably say that they're in the top tier in the league now that they're healthy and have Connor Hickman back. Duke Dean was also just phenomenal yesterday. And then on the Indiana State side, balanced scoring attack from them. Typical Josh Schertz game. Their spacing was really good. Robbie Avila was making a ton of plays. Julian Larry nearly had a steal to win it in regulation, but it was called a foul. And then the other one I kind of focused in on was Drake in Northern Iowa. It was announced like 15 minutes before tip that Bowen Born wasn't playing. And my main takeaway from that was really that RJ Taylor played a ton yesterday. He hasn't been playing a ton this year, but he got 24 minutes yesterday. Played all right. I think he's a really good freshman. I liked him coming out of high school. He's just unfortunately got one of the better guards in the country playing in front of him. I also was really impressed by Titan Anderson. He's listed as a guard, but he doesn't play at all like a guard. Really good using his shoulder and using his body and strength in the low post. Really a tough time for Drake guarding him yesterday. And he's only 6'6", so it's not like you can put a center on him. And then on the Drake side, obviously without Bowen Born, this is a win you should come away with at home pretty much every time. They struggled a little. I think Northern Iowa even led at the half. But one thing I noticed is Tucker DeVries takes a ton of shots, and he obviously should. But I think Drake takes some really bad shots at times, which leads to their offense being a little stagnant and other teams making runs. That happened in the first half a little too much yesterday for my liking, but Bulldogs had a big second half, pulled away with a 14-point win. Let's see, what else did we have? I'm not going to talk as much about these other games, but Southern Illinois got a really good win at Murray State. It was low scoring. They were down 8 at half and came back to win it. Really good game for Xavier Johnson, who hit the game winner. Obviously one of the better scorers in the country. Evansville got a home win over Illinois State team that had been playing well yesterday, 58-54. Missouri State beat Valpo's probably the worst team in the league this year, unfortunately. Like, UIC's competitive with a lot of teams, and Valpo's got a first-year head coach in Roger Powell, who I like, but it's going to take him some time to get things going there. And then Belmont, who was playing just not very great the last couple of weeks, beats UIC at home. It was an obvious get-right game for them that they needed to win, and they did. I think they ended like a 4-game losing streak. Let's see if they can get it rolling now. They haven't looked great so far in conference play. Like, they lost at Illinois State by 10, got killed at Bradley. Like, they had lost 4 straight games, and all of them were by double digits. I like this Belmont team's talent, but they're going to really need to start figuring it out, and if they want to make some noise in this league. That's it for our Valley update. Sam?
Thank you, Jonathan, for updating us on one of the great mid-major leagues out there. Jordan, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, that was great update. I'm a Mo Valley guy. I'm from Terre Haute originally, so I have gone to like every Indiana State home game from like the 80s till 2000 when I moved away and went to IU. So yeah, it's really exciting to see the atmosphere at Holman Center yesterday for that Bradley game. Schertz mentioned how tired Indiana State was. They had come from Chicago for UIC, had less prep than Bradley, 1 day less prep, but still he talked about how tired they were. And yeah, great atmosphere. I'm glad they didn't blow that game, because that's something Holman Center hasn't seen a lot of, a sold out crowd lately for a huge nationally televised game. But yeah, big one with Drake for Indiana State this Saturday. And Drake really exploited some mismatches with DeVries, as they tend to do. But yeah, Jonathan mentioned it with Drake. Their shot selection, they are 248th in shot selection for shot quality, 11th in shot making. So, there are going to be those stretches where if the shots don't fall, they're taking some really awful shots, leads to some, easy transition opportunities with the way from where they shoot the ball as well. So yeah, Saturday, huge game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance we end up leading the show with that, unless there's Tennessee, Kentucky is that day, in Houston, Kansas. Oh my God, and Duke, UNC.
Next Saturday is nuts. It's the best slate of the
yeah,
season.
we will not be leading the show with Drake, Indiana State. I can say that for sure. But next Saturday, wow, that might be the best slate of the season. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even mention UConn is playing at the Garden. Like,
I've had this day marked for a pretty long time.
I typically don't like look ahead all that much in terms of like days on the calendar, but whenever I click on one on KenPom, that one is up there with the best.
Absolutely.
Another thing we didn't really get into last night, Jonathan, I'm sure you saw a lot more of it than I did, but Duke escapes with a win against Clemson. Duke kind of had control of this game for a long time, and then Clemson kind of chipped back in, and eventually Duke was able to come away with the victory. But a lot of controversy surrounding that call at the end.
Yeah, I'm like not super interested in like debating whether it was or wasn't a foul. Like it just is what it is. The game result is what it is. What I'm more interested in is the fact that like I don't know if Duke has like quite figured out who they are yet. Like when I watch them, they run good stuff. They're a good shooting team. They hit a lot of threes. They shoot a very high percentage, and they don't turn it over. But it seems like we don't really know what we're getting from a lot of their players, and honestly, all of their players not named like Jared McCain at this point. Like Proctor and Mitchell have come on lately. Filipowski is just, don't get me wrong, very good player, but it's just very frustrating to see him score 27 one game, and the next game he's 4 of 14 from the field, and I think he was like ended up being 6 of 12 at the line yesterday.
Yeah, his free throw percentage has dropped 10% this year.
Roach didn't have a great game yesterday either, but he got hurt on Tuesday, and so I don't really read too much into that. And it's just at this point, like it's just tough to like know who you're going to get to play well on each night. And as a coach, I think that makes that tough because like it's harder to like know, hey, we're running this set to this guy, we're doing this for this guy. It's just kind of tough to figure that out.
Jordan?
Yeah, I agree. You never see Flip really impose his will on a game, and which is kind of what you need from him sometimes. And, they have dealt with key guys being out of the lineup, like Mitchell especially and Roach. But, they're really young in key spots. And for a team that has like a lot of minutes continuity, they're still really young overall. And that shows up a lot of times. And especially in like their ball screen coverages, they get kind of torched by inferior teams that way. Like two of the bigger ball screen usage teams in the ACC, Georgia Tech and Pitt, who are not two of the better overall teams in the ACC, kind of, ran all over them in ball screens. Like, there's, and that speaks to like their just inability to communicate defensively. But yeah, there's always something when I watch Duke that I'm like, this isn't quite right. And that's hard to say when the team's still the best offensive team in the ACC. But yeah, there's times when they just are not playing as well as they should be for the talent they have on that roster.
Yeah, and I do think that like we are like this is still a 15-4 basketball team that still has opportunities to win huge games. I mean, they go to the Dean Dome next Saturday. That's going to be an epic game. Those games are always battles. I can't think of a Duke UNC game that wasn't a battle. And that's going to, and they could win that game. They could beat UNC. I think UNC isn't quite as good as some people say they are. But I just look at that game and say, hey, that's a chance to make a statement. I know it's on the road, but it's a chance to make a statement. And they don't have another like super super difficult game after that until Carolina again, because the ACC is weak. But they're going to end this season with, they're going to go into the NCAA tournament with 25 wins again. And like that at this point, I know that expectations are always to be the number one team every year, but you can't just, that's just a wild expectation to have every single year. And winning 25 plus games every year should be, it's just fine for the moment. Because I mean, look, you still got the best recruiting class in the country coming in basically every year. And if you can keep, and depending on who you retain and develop, it can be difficult, but it could also get easier down the road for Shire. And I think this is still a really good basketball team that hasn't played their best basketball yet. Yeah. When I saw them at the Garden, I was really impressed with what their freshmen could do. When everything's clicking, when everything is clicking for this Duke team, this ceiling, there's not 5 teams that have a higher ceiling than Duke.
No question. Yeah, the game tomorrow will be interesting, though.
Yeah, Virginia Tech away. That's always a tough one because of how well Virginia Tech shoots the ball. They're second in the ACC in 3-point percentage. They're number 1 in the ACC in effective field goal percentage, and that's just what Virginia Tech always does. And Jonathan, I know that Jonathan doesn't like mentioning that one name.
No, I've never enjoyed playing them. Like it seems like they always at least hang around, and what Hunter Couture did to us like two years ago in the ACC title game was, I mean, it was special. Like, great performance.
Yeah, and then some more games that we didn't really get much into tomorrow. And I kind of relayed your Auburn take that like they just can't win the close games. I kind of relayed that to the people for you. We didn't really get into much on BYU against Texas, though, and that's for BYU now. That was an important one to have at the Marriott Center. You can't drop that home game to Texas. You got to have it. Can't lose 2 home games in a row. And for Texas, I mean, look, they're starting to build their tournament resume, but they're a tournament team as of right now. But it's very tentative because they still have to pick up some more good wins and avoid more disaster, I would say.
Yeah, I think overall, we gave Texas rightfully a lot of credit for going out and rebounding the way they did and knocking off Baylor and then beating Oklahoma on the road. But like both Baylor and Oklahoma lost home games yesterday. I don't think those teams are quite as good as like maybe we once thought them to be earlier in the year. Don't get me wrong, like both good wins for Texas, but like maybe not as good as like people were making it out to be at some point.
Yeah, huge opportunity tomorrow with Houston coming to Austin, but that is not a great matchup for them. I mean, Rodney Terry versus Kelvin Sampson on short prep. And we saw what Houston just did to the smaller guards of Kansas State, like Tyler Perry. And, they could absolutely eat Asmus and Hunter alive tomorrow.
Yeah, I just look at what Texas brings to the table. And I've never been high on this team. I didn't think they were all that great in the preseason when they were in the top 25. I didn't think they were all that great when I saw them in New York at the Empire Classic. And I mean, it stems back to last year where I was unimpressed with Rodney Terry. And I said that they would probably regret giving him the full-time job. And look, I just don't think this team has that level of punch that they need to in this conference. But if they can pick up some more solid wins, then they'll probably find themselves in the tournament. And we know that they have an excellent backcourt. It's just that I never thought that it really worked together, and I still don't think it really works together.
Yeah, absolutely. And they get somewhat of a pass for Disu not being healthy until not truly healthy until recently, and he's legitimately changed their offense recently. He's been nothing short of phenomenal. But so there is some hope for them overall, as they have at least a ceiling to achieve. But yeah, tomorrow we will learn a lot about Texas with Disu, because besides not being able to score from the backcourt, you can't score from the post against Houston. So that's kind of why they're so good. But
you look at BYU then, on the other hand, and something that they've really, really struggled with in the Big 12 is just they've been fouling a lot, and they haven't been getting to the line a lot. They're dead last in both of those. I don't know if there's any other team that's dead last in both of those metrics in their conference, but that's an important win for BYU to have. It's a got to have it, and they're going to be a super variance team because of how many threes they take, but they only took 17 against Texas, and it was a complete offensive performance. 16 assists. They had 1.3 points per possession, and they don't need to be reliant on the three to win, and that's kind of what I think Mark Pope needs to continue to instill from what they did against Texas. You don't need to shoot 35 threes a game to win. They have guys that can create their own shot. They have guys that can really pass. They have basically everyone on the floor is a threat to pass the ball. Everyone on the floor is a threat to kind of get to maybe not get to the basket, but get to a spot. And they need to stop relying on just chucking up a million threes, because they're in the Big 12. You're not going to win enough games to. They built themselves a buffer with the non-conference, but typically, if you just chuck up threes, you're not going to win enough games in the Big 12 to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and similar to Disu coming back for Texas, Traore being healthy for BYU, he was their best player yesterday against Texas, and which is why they only shot 17 threes, because he was actually a legitimate rim threat and rim option. So, they will have more balance going forward with him healthy, I think. So, yeah, which makes them even tougher to prep for then, because they don't have to run all that 5-out zoom action with Khalifa. They have someone who can come in and give them 20 minutes of actual, paint presence.
Yeah, I didn't really get into much yesterday on the UC San Diego result against UC Davis, but
Yeah.
kind of taking a big detour here. But we talked a little bit about UC San Diego during the week, and just how impressed we've been with how they've just totally shot up the rankings, shot up everything. 8-1 in the Big West. They can't even make the tournament this year. Eric Olin is a name to think about right now because of what he's been able to do with his team. Bryce Pope is incredible. He scored 29 yesterday. They killed Davis, and Davis is good. Like, Davis is a good team. They killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. A few weeks ago on my site, I wrote a big thing about, I think UCSD and CSUN were both at like 4-1 at the time. And which both are super surprising in Big West play. So I was like, which one of these is legit and which one is not? I said UCSD was legit, CSUN was not, and they have both fulfilled that prophecy so far. But yeah, UCSD, they have, I make a point to stay up and watch them. They have just the best spread pick and roll offense I think I've seen at the mid-major level. And they have like 3 or 4 guards or guys who all take the ball screen. And especially the New Zealand guy, Tate Jones, has been incredible in that role. He's like 6'6", 6'7", and does absolutely everything. A matchup nightmare in that league. So yeah, they are legit. And the knock on them was always their academics kept a lot of guys out that they wanted to recruit. But yeah, Olin's got, a veteran team this time and is proving it tough offense to match up with.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, what else did we really not get into yesterday? I mean, Eastern Kentucky and North Florida was a game that matched 2 of the top teams in the A-Sun. I'm not sure, Jonathan, if you watched much of either, but I've definitely been able to keep tabs on EKU in the conference slate, and I've just been impressed with the way that they've kind of controlled games more. They kind of let games get away from them in the non-conference slate, and teams were just shooting incredibly well. And now that teams aren't shooting quite as well, it's allowing them to run their offense and not just have to kind of chuck up a lot of shots and try and chase leads, because when they can control games, it makes them so much better. Because look, if you're trying to force teams to come inside and play against Isaiah Cozart, who's maybe the best rim protector in mid-major basketball, it's not going to end well for the offense. So as long as teams aren't making 44% of their threes, I think they're the worst. They have the number 362 3-point defense in the country, but they're 7% better in conference play than they are overall. I don't even know what the number is in non-conference play, and I don't really even want to know. But the fact of the matter is that they're making their defense feeds into their offense, because they are shooting less threes because they don't have to, because they're not chasing. And when they are able to get to the basket, because they have a lot of guards that can pass, they have a lot of guards that can get to the rim. That's something that is just making their offense more malleable, and they're now 7-0 in the ASUN, and they look like the clear top team.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned it. It's having a guy like Cozart, when you press at one of the highest rates in the country, like, he has to lead the country in track down blocks. It's crazy. A team that is, I think, let me look it up, 324th in average height per KenPom has at top 40 2-point percentage defense and the best 2-point percentage defense in the ASUN. So, having that level of rim protection when you press like that on the back end is incredible. And yeah, the biggest thing is they're hitting 42% of their threes in league play, and teams are no longer hitting 42% of their threes against them. Yeah, they've gone from the dead last in 3-point percentage defense overall, but second in the ASUN in 3-point percentage defense. So
I just opened up my Twitter feed, and Rick Pitino is in Albuquerque.
Nice.
I just didn't think that he would go in the middle of the season. I know that St. John's was the week off, but like, that's just a wild thing to think
that's
about.
not a quick jaunt out to Albuquerque. That's.
I want them to play each other next year. I know Iona played New Mexico last year, and they were gonna play this year if Pitino stayed, but that would have been fun. Super Bowl matchup is set, by the way. It is a rematch of the Super Bowl from 20. What Super Bowl number was
it? Technically 2020, but it was the 2019 season.
What Super Bowl number was that?
I'm terrible with Super Bowl numbers.
Me too.
Ever since the Patriots stopped winning them, I forgot. I think that was 54.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that was 54 because the Patriots won 53. All right, matchup is set. We'll get into that in 2 weeks on the Super Bowl special. That's a totally different thing, independent from the podcast, but I'll plug it right now. Now, Jonathan, you kind of texted me yesterday that you didn't really have any major takeaways. Do you still feel that way?
So I don't know if it was because like yesterday just felt like there were, I guess, less like major upsets, not a ton of big teams were falling, but it just like didn't feel like we learned much about a lot of teams yesterday. Like, I think Auburn was probably like my main takeaway, like the fact that they're not great in close games, to put it lightly. But overall, just like I watched a lot of teams and I came away thinking like, okay, like this is kind of who I thought they were. This is kind of how they've been playing at either their best or at their median sort of level. So yeah, I just like didn't have a ton of like overreaction major takeaways. Like it to put it simply, there wasn't anything yesterday that was like seemed like it was like setting up Twitter on fire during the day.
The one team that I'm starting to think like a lot differently about than I thought preseason, and we got into this last night, was Texas Tech. They are just I'm just starting to watch them a little bit more. I didn't really watch their non-conference stuff. I didn't really watch their first few games, but I checked out some of their Oklahoma game. I checked out some of the film from it. Checked out some of the film from the BYU game. They are just the opposite of what I thought they would be. And again, I remember I said this offseason, Pop Isaacs is Big 12 Chucky Hepburn, but he's been a legit number one for them. And I thought that they would be an elite interior defense with the guys that they brought in from Arizona State plus McCasland, but it just hasn't been that way. But you get Chance McMillan off the bench to score 27 yesterday, and they are running good stuff. They're hitting shots, and I mean, McCasland is. I mean, I know Rothstein's tagline is Miracle Mac. It just kind of feels. I remember what I said about them was they have the lowest deviation between ceiling floor in the offseason. They've kind of burst through that ceiling of what I thought they had. I just was like, no way this team could be like a 5 seed type. But right now, if you look at the fact they're 16-3, they're 5-1 in the Big 12. I know they've played one of the easier Big 12 schedules, but they look like a team that could be a 5 seed right now.
Yeah, that was a good matchup for them, though, Oklahoma, scheme-wise, because their guards Texas Tech's guards are really shifty, and Oklahoma plays a lot of deep drop coverage. So as they tend to do, Texas Tech had a great game against that drop coverage. But yeah, they're the splits between their offense and defensive metrics are crazy in league play. Like, who would have thought this McCasland team would be the best offense in the Big 12 and near the bottom defensively? I would have said that they were a great defensive team who would have trouble scoring against Big 12 defenses, but it's been the total opposite. They're hitting 40% from three, but they're also allowing nearly 40% from three. So it's kind of hard to get a pulse on how real they are. And as you mentioned, their Big 12 schedule has not been difficult whatsoever.
Yeah, and like the thing about that is like it wasn't just the coach that made me think that they would be like a McCasland team in the offseason. It was the personnel too. Like it wasn't a team that was stocked with scorers. They brought in the front court from the number 6 2-point defense in the country last year in Arizona State. I really thought that this had the makings of like a worse, like I didn't think they would be better than what North Texas was last year because they didn't have a Tyler Perry, and they haven't needed a Tyler Perry because they've gotten offensive contributions from a lot more people than I thought they would, and it's just they don't make much sense, but they're starting to make sense because I'm starting to see it more, and I'm starting to be less surprised by it as the games go on.
Yeah.
Big
week for them. It's been way steadier on the ball than I projected that they'd be as well.
Yeah. Big week coming up for them this week, even though they have Kansas and Iowa State in mid-February. But this week, TCU on the road and then home against Cincinnati. You got to hold serve against Cincinnati. If you win at TCU, that's a statement. Winning at Oklahoma in itself is definitely a statement. I know Oklahoma has really struggled in Big 12 play, but now that's back-to-back home losses for Oklahoma, and they're not slipping towards the bubble, but the reality is that this is not the team that we thought would be a top 10 type team after however many weeks of the season.
Yeah.
That was ranked in the top 10 after however many weeks in the season. I know I had them there just because like they hadn't lost and I was impressed with some of their performances. But even then, Iowa hasn't been quite as good maybe as they once looked. USC is nowhere near what they were projected to be. Arkansas, obviously, as well. And Providence, they killed them with Hopkins. So I'm just going to not think about that. But Oklahoma is falling.
Yeah. And McCollum, your old friend of yours, he has looked like an up transfer against elite Big 12 defenders recently. So, that's a problem when he creates so much of your offense too.
I mean, I watched a lot of him last year. I saw a bunch of those games in person, really close up, like at St. Peter's, really, really close up. and just he's so thin. Like, I know he's listed at 6'2", 160, but like he's so thin. Like when you see it in person, and love the guy. So shifty, such just a great shot maker, can do a lot of things for you. But there's a reason that I thought he was going to be an A10 player when he entered the portal.
Yeah.
It just kind of feels with Oklahoma like the talent level of the Big 12 caught up to them. Like you said it, Sam. Their schedule didn't end up being as good as we thought it was. Like all those four wins against high majors in non-con that they had, like all of them might miss the NCAA tournament. So, like you obviously got the road win at Cincinnati last week, but dropping both 2 home games to Texas and Texas Tech is just really brutal and frankly missed opportunities.
Yeah, and the next thing that I kind of want to get into there, I haven't thought about this, but it just came to my mind, and if nothing comes to mind, then we'll just move on. But we've mentioned a lot of teams whose schedules have aged poorly. Is there anyone that jumps out as a schedule that's aged really well compared to what we thought?
Let me think about that for a second.
I'm trying to think about that as well. Maybe just kind of look through some of these teams. God, it's just, I mean, Dayton kind of fits that a little bit. I mean, aside from the loss to Chicago State, Northwestern's been really good. Houston's awesome. And then like Oakland is really good, and they played them. They killed them. Cincinnati is better than we thought they would be. SMU is way better than we thought they would be. Youngstown State's figured it out. LSU is what we thought they would be. But I think overall for Dayton, that's one of them. I would say a schedule that has aged pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else has had. I'll just search like non-conference strength of schedule type stuff.
I have a like kind of sneaky one for you. Like
right, what?
Their non-con schedule wasn't thought of to be super good, and they did lose a couple like not so good games. But like Miss State has played a lot of teams. They played a lot of teams in non-con that like we would describe, Sam, as like mid-majors you don't want to schedule because like you could lose to them and they like don't really help your resume if you win. But like North Texas has been good. Tulane's has played really well lately. Like Washington State's up to 44 in Ken Palm. They won that game by 12 in neutral, and then they played Northwestern too and beat them.
Yeah, I just found another one. I mean, Florida State, Georgia's better than we thought. Colorado's better than we thought. North Carolina's better than that's a conference game, but whatever. South Florida's been good. SMU's been good. Florida's been pretty solid. Winthrop and Lipscomb have been pretty solid. But, I mean, that's not a tournament team anyway.
SMU actually is a team I would mention. They have been so close, a couple different bounces. They were leading the second half against Wisconsin, lost by 2 to Dayton, lost by 2 to Arizona State, lost by 3 to Memphis. Like
2 to North Texas. I mean, my God,
yeah,
close games.
Yeah, a couple different bounces. They're like, a sneaky bubble team. I mean, they still are, but
I don't see them getting in. Just like with those metrics. I mean, they've 7 losses, 3 in the American. I mean, I know that they're all on the road in the conference, but like I just don't see them as a team that's going to stock up. They don't have the chances to get enough wins. They just don't.
They've only at FAU is about all they have left.
I mean, they don't have any good wins. Like Florida State's their best win.
Yeah. But yeah, just in terms of a sneaky good schedule, that if they had hit, just 1 or 2 more shots, they would be right there.
Yeah. We did kind of one more thing that we kind of discussed yesterday that I want to get a little more. It's just kind of, Jonathan, want to hear what you have on it. We kind of talked about Holtman last week a lot, but it's at a point where it's not tenable anymore after this loss to Northwestern. And I know we discussed how they just weren't able to get stops late in games. They weren't able to get stops at all against Northwestern. They allowed 1.36 points per possession. Things are getting really bad. It's the second straight year that this has happened. it's untenable.
Yeah, I think it might be time for change there. I've never been a huge Chris Holtmann guy to begin with, but I think there are a lot of things, or at least some things he does, that are very not easy fixes, but things that haven't been fixed that are kind of a year by year thing. Like for a while, I thought he did a very good job, a very bad job developing and like recruiting like pure like bigs and rim protectors. Obviously, he has Felix Akpara now, so he did try to address that, but it just seems like at some point, if you lose enough close games, at some point it's not just variance. At some point it's coaching, and frankly, in the Big Ten, there are a lot of close games. A lot of teams get home wins, and Ohio State over the last couple of years has really failed to close out games and win on the road too.
Jordan, anything?
Yeah. From Ohio State people, the seed is beyond scarlet hot for a Ohio State reference. But lately the issue has been he's been getting big time talent like why can't I think of the guy last year who Sensabaugh, yeah. And then Thornton, and then not making them into a winnable product or a product that wins games. And they kind of just hijacked the team, Sensabaugh especially last year. And he used to be a guy who was known for his deep playbook and the kind of motion principles they ran. They just don't do that anymore. And I think that's speaking to getting talented guys in and then not being able to build a system around them, and they kind of just take over, and it's not a product that's winning, obviously.
By the way, game opening kill shot for the Lobos. JT Toppin just drains. I think JT Toppin just drained a 3, which doesn't happen often. But 10-0.
Ridiculously fun team.
Yeah, I mean, I love this team so much. I mean, it's not just because they have Nelly Jr. Joseph on the team, but I mean, you just look at Donovan Dent might be the most fun player in the country. Jalen House is so great, and JT Toppin's awesome, and they got something cooking, man. They are probably going to be either number 1 or number 2 in my mid-major top 25. It's going to be either them or Dayton, because I'm assuming they're going to win this game. They're 24th in KenPom right now. They're actually ranked ahead of Dayton in KenPom right now. They are a wagon.
Nevada's 80th not in KenPom. Nevada's 80th in Torvik since Christmas Day.
Yeah, Nevada.
They did this last year too.
Yeah, it's the same deal. Last year they were also just never quite as high last year in the metrics. They actually kind of got high during conference play when because the Mountain West is a buzzsaw, and the Mountain West will raise your KenPom even if you're not winning. I mean, it helps to beat Utah State by 15 and San Diego State and New Mexico on the road. But regardless of that, the fact of the matter is New Mexico last year was 5-2 they were 5-2, 6-3 at around this point. They were 19-3 as well. They're probably going to get to 18-3 today. Last year they were 19-3. They finished 21-10. Are you concerned at all about maybe that happening again?
I wrote about this, but this is such an inflection point game for them, this Nevada game, because Alfred has never lost to New Mexico since he went to Nevada. So this is kind of, Peyton Manning beating the Patriots for a Sam reference there. I think if they get past this game, they kind of become they don't have a repeat of last year. If they doesn't a great start to this game, but if they end up losing this, Nevada's big guards just kept backing them down last year in every game they played, and I could see it kind of shooting their confidence a little bit. And then, like you said, there's just so many gauntlet games in the Mountain West that it could kind of pile up. So
Yeah.
I think this is such a huge game in terms of how their season goes from here. If they kind of, hit the skids a little bit, or if they just continue to be a wagon.
Jonathan, anything from the resident Richard Pitino doubter?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I don't think Patino's a great coach, but I really like this New Mexico team. Like very unsure what I'm gonna end up doing with them in the NCAA tournament because I tend to lean coaches in the tournament, and even though like I really like this team, they're so complete. They're not super deep, but their top 5 is just a ridiculous group, and Donovan Dent being their best guard this year has been a very pleasant surprise.
All right, so let's now kind of just broaden out where we stand in the college basketball season right now. And I kind of like what we just did with New Mexico, just kind of compare it to where we stood at this point last year, because I think that that's not something that I really tend to think about a lot, but I'm going to do it right now because let's take a look. So last year at this time, number 1 in KenPom was Houston. Number 2 was Tennessee, Alabama, UCLA, Purdue, UConn. And there were a bunch of teams that ended up falling. A bunch of teams that ended up falling pretty far were, let's see. Utah, they fell 35 spots after this day last year. Florida fell 31. Ohio State obviously fell a bunch. Rutgers, when Mog got injured. Virginia fell a ton. There's kind of a theme, obviously, with Rutgers and Virginia there, and then because they couldn't really, because those teams ended up not being able to score. Ohio State ended up not being able to get a stop. Are there any teams that we kind of think are like paper tigers right now? I mean, we kind of decided that Auburn was a semi paper tiger over the weekend, but are there any other teams that we think are paper tigers?
I think in the current top 10, I would be most concerned about North Carolina. The shooting against them in ACC play is just, hilariously bad right now. I think around 25% from 3. They haven't really played anybody in the ACC as well. And I just think there's some issues with the size of their guards as well. I think that they have the biggest chance of taking a fairly steep drop.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about this, and Jonathan, you texted me yesterday. Actually, you tell me what you texted me
about UNC.
Carolina. Yeah.
Oh, it was today, I think, right?
It was.
So it's weird, and here's the example I guess I can kind of use. Purdue plays Rutgers today, and Rutgers starts coming back. Everyone's locked in on it. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, not super great look for Purdue that they're playing this way, which I think is fair criticism. But that seems to happen a lot with Purdue when they're playing kind of down to an in-conference opponent. And granted, I don't think the Big Ten's very good, but the ACC is also not very good. I don't feel like UNC gets the same criticism when they play down to teams. They were playing really bad at stretches yesterday against Florida State. The week before at Boston College, they weren't playing very well. And I think they get the positivity that surrounds a top 5-10 team, but they don't get the criticism of a top 5-10 team when they play bad.
Yeah, I remember when they beat Syracuse and they just all of a sudden, whoa, people are ranking them number 1. And I said this last week and I just didn't get it. And I still don't get it. I don't think Armando Bacot's a superstar. I don't think this RJ Davis stuff is sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, he's never been a freaking 42% shooter on volume. He's never been this. He's never had a offensive rating 125 on this type of volume. No, this is not going to sustain. The fact of the matter is he's a superstar. Davis is a superstar. He's an All-American, but he's playing above his station right now. And I just think that he's going to come down to earth, and it's really eventually going to come down to whether they get more, I think, out of Cormac Ryan going forward, more out of Harrison Ingram going forward. I think those are the key pieces going forward on the offensive end that I'm going to need to. I mean, and they've been great, but how much easier does it make when RJ Davis is hitting 40% of his threes, and you are basically playing from ahead because nobody else can make a shot? I don't believe that this defense is as good as the metrics say it is. I don't think that. I mean, they don't force turnovers. They're a good rebounding team. I mean, Armando's great at that, but I don't think Armando's all too great of a rim protector, honestly, for a guy that's a dominant 6'11" center in college basketball. I don't think he's a great rim protector. I don't think he does a lot of that type of stuff, and I think they've been hustling a lot better this year than last year. They've been more invested. But at what point do they then begin to run out of gas? Because again, this is a super thin team, and Carolina, I never saw them. I know they have this long winning streak, but I never saw them the same way a lot of people did. And granted, it's hard to not rank them as a top 5-6 team in the country right now, but like, I still think Duke is right there with them in terms of best team in the ACC.
Yeah. Something we haven't mentioned as well, Cadeau on the ball has helped Davis a lot, but he's also struggled against elite competition, at which he has not seen in the ACC yet. So, something to keep an eye on when we get to, playing Duke, or I guess that's about it for the rest of the ACC schedule.
And then get to the point that they're on a collision course to play 3 times. It's going to happen. But then what happens when we get to the NCAA tournament and Carolina's like 27-5 or something, and they're a 1 seed, and they get 8th seeded TCU, not TCU, or 8th seeded Colorado, who is physical and has bodies and can move the ball like crazy, or if they get 8th seeded St. John's or something like that, who's super well coached. I just think there's a lot of mismatches that can eventually be exploited with this Carolina team that the ACC just isn't good enough to exploit.
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting if you look like really into their schedule so far in conference play, because they've played like 5 road games and nobody has scored 70 points in those road games against them yet. And then you look even further into it and realize that the teams that they've played on the road so far in terms of 3-point shooting in conference are 9th, 10th, 13th, 14th, and 15th in the ACC.
Yeah.
All right. Then on the other side of the spectrum, are there any teams that you could see really rising up the metrics over the next couple of months this season? For what it's worth, the notable teams that did that the most last year were South Alabama. North Texas did a really good job of it. UAB, Indiana State did it well. I'm just looking for some more high majors now. Villanova, when they got Justin Moore back. Cincinnati jumped up. Michigan jumped. FAU. Michigan State as well. And I honestly think Michigan State is this year pretty good, like overall. I know they've lost 8 games, but they've had a lot of games recently where I've thought they've looked good compared to the amount of games where I thought they've looked bad. And I think they're 18th against them. It's not like they're gonna rise up a ton. That's probably around where they are, maybe even lower than that. But I think they get a lot of hate for a team that I don't think is all that bad. A team that I think could rise, though. Jonathan, you want to go here?
Yeah, sure. I think just kind of scrolling. I've been super impressed with Washington State lately. Like, got two really big home wins this week against the mountain teams in the Pac-12. And I just think they lost a lot of talent from last year's team. And I also I'm with you, Sam. I think Kyle Smith's a very good coach. And I think the way they've been playing, I wouldn't be super surprised if they started to play their way into real bubble conversation and picked up some big wins at home and on the road here.
I'm also trying to look through here and see who I could really see jumping. I
think Maryland is a good candidate.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
That was another one I was going to throw out.
Yeah, they've seemed to figure something out.
Yeah, Kaiser's hitting some shots. Long is hitting some shots. It's not just Jameer Young. I mean, it's still a ton of Jameer Young, but they just need a modicum of shooting from anybody, which they've kind of gotten the past two games. And this is a typical Willard defense. I mean, they're the best defense in the Big Ten currently. So, that's a team that could really make some noise down the stretch here.
I'm going to give you one here. Florida State.
Yeah.
I really I obviously got to see them, not necessarily close up, but in person on Tuesday at the Dome. And I mean, Jameer Watkins has been one of my favorite players in the country. Their offense has looked so much better since Primo Spears has come back. I mean, he's made life so much easier for them. They're 6-3 in the ACC. They're 73rd. They have opportunities to rise. I mean, they're only 8-point Ken Pom favorites against Louisville, and they're actually Ken Pom underdogs at Boston College. I think they're significantly better than both of those teams. I think they'll handle both of them, and they could be 58th in Ken Pom by the Virginia game on the 10th. I think Leonard Hamilton has kind of figured out how to use this team a little more. Baba Miller is starting to become more consistent and figure stuff out. They have Darren Green in the backcourt who can really shoot the ball. And I mean, Josh Nickelberry coming off the bench, playing as little as he does. I mean, I know he hasn't really played much in ACC play, but that's a guy who was one of the better scorers in the A10 last year. If they can figure out how to use him, then I think they can be even more dangerous. And I think Worley, he's physical. He's a good passer. They can be really physical. They can be a matchup problem for a lot of teams. And honestly, I think they were a matchup problem in a way for Carolina. It's just that Carolina, they couldn't finish it against Carolina in terms of they couldn't get to the line. They couldn't hit their free throws, and that's kind of their Achilles heel.
Can I throw out one more for you guys?
Go ahead.
Sam, you're gonna laugh. UCLA.
No, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. They've been playing better basketball.
They've been the best defense. Yeah. They've been the best defense in the Pac-12 this year, and overall, their schedule looks very manageable. The rest of the way, you just reading off some games here. Their next month or so, you have Oregon teams coming to you. You have the NorCal trip on the road, which both those games are very winnable. You have the Mountain teams coming to you. Then you have USC at home, and then you end the year with you have the Washington trip and then the Arizona teams at home.
I said this last night, the Utah game was a very big wake-up call for them.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, New Mexico's still up 23-8 now and running in transition. And a mid-range, no good. All right, but still 23-8.
But yeah, all three of those teams, Maryland, Florida State, and UCLA, I like a lot, and they all have the same characteristic of elite defense
and a veteran coach.
And great coach, defensive coaches especially, and just need any form of offense, and that kind of can come as the year progresses.
Yeah, and I think this is the time of year where you start to see those veteran coaches remember that they're veteran coaches and get things back on track. Mark Schmidt's St. Bonaventure's gonna be just fine. They killed St. Joe's because Billy Lang sucks and Mark Schmidt doesn't. And look, it's that simple. Not much more happened in that game. Billy Lang stinks. He should be fired. And I've been saying this for a while. And Mark Schmidt is really good. And I remember it's just so hard to do. It's so hard to have any success at St. Bonaventure. And Schmidt's just built them into a consistently good A10 team. They're 3-4 right now, but they have VCU at home. They could I mean, Ryan Odom's a great coach, and I think VCU is also a team that's kind of surging right now. I think they could move up a bit, but I think they can handle them. They can handle UMass. They can handle Duquesne. Like, I think St. Bonaventure, by the time we get to late February, is right in that NIT picture.
I'll throw out one more for a team that can keep falling or like fall really far.
Go ahead.
The other team in LA, like I know they're already like sitting at 94th, but
it's not getting any better
with the injuries they have, and like Enfield's probably losing his job. Like it feels like they could just check out and kind of just fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's a veteran.
I mean, they already are falling apart.
I know it's a veteran coach that fits that criteria, but he's also not a great coach, and we've kind of established that. The fact of the matter is that they've made one second weekend in over a decade with that budget and that pull, and with those expectations. The fact of the matter is that he's got to go. Like, and I've been saying this. It's the most desirable job in the country because you can stay there for 10 years with no success, make a crap load of money, live in Beverly Hills and basically not have any expectations to do anything more than you really need to. Andy Enfield might never, if he never coaches another game of basketball in his life, he has enough money to put his grandchildren through college. So, like, the fact of the matter is that he's just like it's apathy from that fan base because they don't have a basketball fan base. It took Lincoln Riley coming over to build back their football fan base. It's just such an easy job to stay in and not really make any waves in if you're just fine. But the fact of the matter is, any great coach should be able to break through there.
Yep.
All right. I don't think we got much more, but tomorrow, Duke, Virginia Tech, Houston, and Texas. Those are the only two games really worth talking about tomorrow.
Yep.
Every other game is like SWAC. They have SWAC, Southland. No, it's not the SWAC. It's just the Southland. No, there are SWAC games.
Yeah, Monday is always SWAC-tion. Yeah.
I was gonna say, don't disrespect the SWAC-tion.
MEAC. There is one Patriot League game. Not that that's much better than the MEAC or the SWAC this year.
Yeah, the Patriot League always gets that Monday night CBS Sports game.
Yeah, that's BU and Holy Cross. BU coming off that win against Lafayette, which we talked about very briefly last night. I just had to mention the Otto Landrum performance from the viral, the most random viral TikTok of the year.
You're gonna have to send this to me.
You haven't seen the Otto Landrum?
I am unfamiliar with the Otto Landrum TikTok as well.
All right. Anyway, then Tuesday's the really fun day. Early this week. I'll definitely be in the bunker after my class ends, watching a bunch of basketball. We'll have plenty of fun guests come on that night because that's a big night of basketball. Any games that stand out to you that might not stand out to others?
On Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, San Diego State and Colorado State, that's going to stand out for everyone, but Dutcher's going to have a week of prep for that one for an offense that's really good, but he has schemed really well against in prior matchups. So
one game that I will absolutely not have my eye on is the most uninteresting team in the country, Oklahoma State against Kansas. But
you're going to say that.
Yeah. One team that, again, I think could be one game that I think could be pretty fascinating is the Loyola Marymount Gonzaga game because
that was gonna be mine.
Loyola Marymount is a fun team. They were fun when I watched them against Yale. They were fun when I watched them yesterday against St. Mary's. They've been there. They got some fun guys. They got Justice Hill. They got Justice Hill back from injury. They've got Dom Harris, who's the Gonzaga transfer. So that's a revenge game for him. And it's Gonzaga has looked vulnerable, but they've looked better. And I just want to see, we talked about this with Josh on Thursday, Gonzaga being better. Are they, like, how much better is better for Gonzaga at this point?
Yeah, we got some fun rivalries on Tuesday. You got the Egg Bowl basketball edition. You got Texas Tech TCU. You have Tom Izzo against whoever's coaching for the team in maize and blue these days.
Sharon Moore. Tom Izzo against Sharon Moore.
Just let him coach basketball. It can't be any worse than the product we're putting out there now.
What was that sideline interview that he did after the game? What was it like? Something ridiculous.
He was just like crying, and like people were making fun of him.
It was a wild that was a wild day.
Yeah, one more note on that LMU Gonzaga game. LMU won at the Kennel last year.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. So yeah.
That's their huge home winning streak and massive, I forget what it was, but WCC home winning streak specifically.
We had a piece on that on Mid-Major Madness.
Yeah, a little extra juice in that one.
Yeah, let me find that. It was, can't find it.
But yeah, something crazy, like years and years where Gonzaga hadn't lost the WCC game at home.
Yeah, it was absolutely wild. I bet I can find it very soon. But,
I want to say it was like BYU in 2018 or something was the last, or probably St. Mary's in 2018.
It was, let's see. Oh my God. We have a lot of articles mentioning the word Gonzaga. Okay, 76.
Yeah.
76 game home winning streak, and it was a 25 game winning streak against Loyola.
Wow.
Which, oh my God, that's insane. All right, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Jonathan, you want to take us home?
I would love to take us home, Sam. If you came here to hear about Tyler Self's job and where he's currently working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about Rick Pitino being in apparently Albuquerque, New Mexico on January 28th, well, then you came to the right place. And if you came here to hear about what's going on with Caleb Grill and what he's up to, well, you came to the right place. This is Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers Season 4, Episode 37. We'll see you tomorrow night.